All right, Nick, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders had a lot of change this offseason, pretty much a brand new front office when it comes to coaching staff and, general manager, all of those things. But there's another aspect of the Raiders seeing there could be some big changes to this roster. And the one trade that is being thrown out there would be one of the biggest Raiders players finding himself somewhere else. I think this is a very interesting story, so Raiders fans stay tuned. Before we get to that, though, I'm Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, a big Las Vegas Raider name may be on their way headed out to another team. But before Raiders fans revolt and, kind of protest this move, I think there's some really smart implications, ideas behind the opportunity here. So let's get into the article and we can break it down on the other side. This, of course, is from over on Lombardi Ave. It says, Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero provided insight into the futures of several NFL stars, including Raiders' Max Crosby. They noted that why Carroll's arrival helps the Raiders' quarterback uncertainty, and roster holes might prevent them from competing in 2025. Then came the most interesting part of the article. While the hiring of Super Bowl winner Pete Carroll was a step towards stability, the Raiders still don't have a franchise quarterback and a ton of work to do to field a competitive roster. Trading Max Crosby for a bounty of picks would be one way to expedite that process, and Crosby might welcome the change, particularly if it's a playoff team where he knows people, e.g., Green Bay was the option that was floated out here, and I think there's some merit to that as well. Here's what your thoughts are on the possibility of this, Nick. But before we get to you, Raiders fans, in the comments section below, I know there's a lot of people that probably immediately say, no, we don't want this to happen. So if you don't want it to happen, tell us what Max Crosby brings to this team as far as how keeping him would keep the team, make them immediate contenders. But if you like the trade, let us know your thoughts on that in the comments below. I think it could be a really big opportunity for them as well. But Nick, what are your thoughts on this latest possible trade for the Raiders?
If you take just the emotional connection to Crosby aside, it actually makes a lot of sense for the Raiders, especially if they can get a lot in return for Crosby. So let's look at Crosby's performance last season, the general trend he's on as a player. So this is according to PFF. In 2021, 2022, and 2023, he had over 90 overall grades, according to PFF defensive grade. As a pass rusher, those 3 seasons starting in 2021, he graded out 92, 84, and 84. And as a run defender, 80, 83, 93, right? Elite, obviously, first team all pro kind of stuff. Just phenomenal player. 2024, I know some injuries were a factor, but if you look at his numbers, pass rush grade 70, still good, massive drop off though. Run defense grade 73, still good, massive drop off. Defensive overall grade 74, still good, but not quite the same. Now's an opportunity for the Raiders to sell high on Crosby because everyone still sees him as the guy who had those 3 monster years. If you wait another year and he has another good but not great year, you will get a lot less in return. Now's the time you could get a contender or a team that thinks they're a contender, like the Green Bay Packers, to really overspend for Crosby, and you could get an absolutely massive haul. And I think this is where the Raiders can take advantage because Crosby's contract situation is very favorable to both teams for a trade. So going into 2025, he's got a $28 million cap hit according to overthecap.com. If the Raiders traded him, they would eat about $10 million and save about 18 million bucks. That means a team, whoever would receive Crosby, would take on that $18 million cap space, that cap hit. What happens there is then the Raiders would have $18 million to free up to go sign someone else in free agency. And also they would get whatever draft picks they would receive in the trade in return. And that $18 million, that's not so scary of a cap hit for a team like the Packers. They can easily absorb that. In fact, most teams would view anything under 25 for a player of Crosby's caliber to be well worth it for a short-term opportunity. I think the Raiders have a great chance here to get a team like Green Bay to send, we're talking a first, a third, a first, a second, something like that to the Raiders to make it happen. And we know Crosby has connection with the Green Bay Packers. A couple former Raiders play for Green Bay. Packers GM Brian Gutekunst has come out earlier this offseason and say, hey, time to have a sense of urgency. We got to make some moves. We talked about it the other day. The Packers themselves are very interested in a player like Crosby. We think there's a good chance the Packers highly pursue it. And if they do, the Raiders would be very smart, very clever to take advantage of that and turn Crosby into a bunch of great assets. And I know Crosby's the leader of the team, heart and soul. I get all of that. But the reality is, with Crosby on the field, great player, they're not winning football games. You need more than Max Crosby to turn this team around. And Pete Carroll has traded popular players before. He did it with Russell Wilson. Ask Seattle Seahawks fans how that turned out for them. They're very pleased with the fact that the Seahawks traded Russell Wilson when Wilson was still perceived very highly, and Seattle got an absolute haul for him. It's one of the great trades of all time. I think the Raiders, obviously Pete Carroll now, have a chance to perform the same kind of act and turn Max Crosby into a bunch of valuable assets that can put this Vegas franchise headed in the right direction.
Yeah, Nick, I think when you look at this, it's something really similar to Raiders fans. I think you think back to the Khalil Mack trade to the Bears. It's a really emotional player, a player that's tied to the team, a big name star. But when they made that trade, the Raiders, they got 2 first-round picks for Khalil Mack. Huge trade at the time. I think something similar in value, like you said, I'm expecting at least like a first and a second for a guy like Crosby. But when you think about it, and I want to put this in perspective, when they traded Khalil Mack to the Bears, you would get the perspective of, oh, elite edge rusher, edge defender, guy like Max Crosby, guy like Khalil Mack. What did that do for the Bears? It didn't do anything for them. They really didn't gain a whole lot from it. It didn't really make a late season playoff push. He didn't help out a lot and eventually gets traded to the Chargers. An elite edge rusher for a team that is still struggling, still rebuilding, it's not going to be the make or break difference of you to make late season pushes. Now, trading a guy like Max Crosby, who in his own right has been interested in being traded from the Raiders to a contender, I think the picks that you're able to pick up from a trade like that, that would be huge for this Raiders franchise. To get an extra first round pick, extra second round pick, I think that would help this team rebuild significantly and rebuild very quickly. I think a la you look again at the Chicago Bears trading out of that first round pick a couple years ago, being able to get that huge haul of picks and what they were able to get from it. They're set up much, much better than they were a couple years ago. So sometimes you have to look at the possible benefits of something. In this case, also look at what the benefits of keeping Crosby are. I don't think the benefits of keeping him are very, very big for the Raiders. And I think the benefits of trading him at the right time, as we said, are going to be massive for the Raiders. So to me, it's a no-brainer decision. Moving off Max Crosby would be good if the price is right.
And you don't have to look too far outside your own division to see where teams learn from this mistake. The Chargers are a great example of it, right? How about the Kansas City Chiefs? They had L'Jarius Sneed. A lot of people valued him as a very elite corner, shutdown corner, certainly quality starter. The Tennessee Titans gave up a third-round pick for Sneed. A lot of people thought the Titans got a steal. Now the Chiefs look like they got a steal because Sneed has fallen off completely. Max Crosby is 10 times the player L'Jarius Sneed has ever been. This is an opportunity for a team, again, to get hyper-aggressive, thinking they need a guy like Crosby, and they will just unload their assets to get him. I think this is a great chance for the Raiders. Again, golden opportunity. We've got a great new GM in Spytech. He's all about wheeling and dealing for putting the team in both short-term and long-term success. He did that phenomenal at Tampa, right? Did a great job with the Brady era at the end there and a great transition into what they've done. He can handle both situations very easily. We know Pete Carroll's got experience, and you have the man himself, Tom Brady, being involved as well. I think a big deal is coming, and I know it's going to hurt to see a guy like Crosby go, but I think in the long term, it would be the right move for this franchise.